I never thought that telling my own daughter I couldn't watch her kids anymore would end up being the moment she decided I was worthless. I was leaning on the kitchen counter, rubbing my knees. They'd given out on me last week, and the pain had been a steady throb since. Jenna was by the sink, scrubbing a plate like she was punishing it for existing. I told her softly, almost apologetically, "Honey, I can't keep chasing after the little ones every day. My knees can't take it anymore." She didn't look at me right away. Instead, she slammed the plate into the sink so hard that the echo rattled my ribs. Then she turned around, eyes wild and sharp as broken glass. "Then you're just taking up space here," she screamed. It felt like she'd ripped my heart straight out of my chest and hurled it across the room. My own daughter, the little girl who used to sleep curled up on my chest when she had fevers. The teenager I stayed up with through every heartbreak and college essay meltdown. Now she saw me as clutter, a useless thing to step around, like an old box she'd been meaning to toss out. I stood there, trembling. My hands curled around the edge of the counter, knuckles white, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. She kept going, her voice slicing the air like a knife. "You don't help. You just eat and sit around. You're in my way. You always have been." I felt my knees buckle, the pain forgotten in that instant, replaced by a cold emptiness that spread through my bones. I saw the contempt on her face, and in that moment I realized something that cut even deeper than her words. She had never seen me. Not really. All those nights I stayed up so she could sleep. All the money I quietly shifted around after her husband left her. The apartment I sold so she and the kids could keep this roof over their heads. None of it mattered. I wasn't a mother in her eyes anymore. I was just taking up space. I stood there, in that kitchen filled with the smell of leftover coffee and old cereal bowls, and one understood. I had lost her. But more than that, I had lost myself. That evening, after Jenna's words had echoed in my skull all day, I went into the guest bedroom and started packing. My knees were still aching, but the pain felt far away, drowned out by the roar inside my head. "You're just taking up space." I folded my blouses with trembling hands. Each soft cotton shirt felt heavier than the last. I couldn't stop the tears from falling onto the fabric, leaving dark, shameful blotches. Jenna hovered at the door, arms crossed like a warden waiting for a prisoner to finish gathering their few possessions. She didn't say a word at first, just watched, judging. Then, in that same sharp voice that had cut me open earlier, she muttered, "I don't know why you're crying. You should have known this was coming. Lazy old women don't get free rides forever." Her words landed like slaps across my face. I wanted to scream that I had given her everything. My time, my savings, my peace of mind. But my voice wouldn't work. I thought of all the times I had rushed into that room at night when she had nightmares as a child. How she used to wrap her tiny arms around my neck and whisper, "Don't leave me, Mama." Now she couldn't wait for me to leave. I shoved a small stack of photos into my bag. My only defense against the loneliness I knew was waiting for me. Photos of her as a baby, of birthdays and scraped knees, of moments I thought were proof that I mattered. She stood there the whole time, her glare turning me to dust. When I zipped up my suitcase, she scoffed and walked away, muttering something about finally having her space back. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the room around me suddenly unfamiliar, cold, like it had never belonged to me. In that silence, I realized that I had been living as a guest in my own life for years. When I finally stood up to leave, I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I knew I'd crumble right there on that stained carpet, and she'd watch without an ounce of pity. I carried my bag out like a ghost, each step an echo of all the times I had carried her, and she didn't even say goodbye. I ended up at Linda's place that night, dragging my suitcase up her creaky front steps like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Linda opened the door in her old pink robe, hair tied up messily, eyes wide with worry. She didn't ask me anything at first, just pulled me in and wrapped her arms around me. When I finally sat down in her spare room, It smelled faintly of lavender and old books. The bedspread was worn but soft, and there was a small lamp on the dresser, its warm glow trying to convince me I wasn't completely alone. I sank into that bed and stared at the ceiling. Jenna's words kept looping in my head like a cruel chant, just taking up space. Lazy old woman, no free rides. I thought about all those years ago when Mark left her with 2 small children and no job. How I packed up my own life, my apartment in another city, my small circle of friends, my half-finished quilting projects, and moved in without a second thought. I sold that apartment for her. Every cent went to her mortgage, school fees, groceries. I didn't keep a penny for myself. I thought I was saving my daughter. But sitting there in Linda's room, I realized the truth that hurt worse than any insult. Jenna had never learned to save herself. She had never learned to see me as anything but a backup plan. A live-in babysitter, a wallet on legs, an old ghost to scold when life didn't go her way. My hands shook as I flipped through the small stack of photos I'd brought. Jenna at 5, toothy smile and tangled hair. Jenna at 13, head on my lap after her first heartbreak. Jenna at 25, beaming as I held her first baby. I pressed a photo to my chest, feeling that old ache bloom again. When did I lose her? When did my little girl become this cold woman who saw me as furniture she could toss out? I didn't know. And that unknowing carved a hollow space inside me so deep, I thought I might fall in and never crawl out. But somewhere underneath the grief, a tiny ember flickered, the faintest whisper of a question. What if I stopped waiting to be chosen? What if I finally chose myself? The next morning, I woke up in Linda's spare room with that question still echoing in my head. What if I chose myself? I got dressed slowly, my knees complaining the whole time. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Eyes puffy from crying, hair flattened, skin drawn tight over the bones of my grief. But there was something else there too. A sharpness, a quiet decision gathering like a storm behind my eyes. After breakfast, I asked Linda if she could drop me off at the city records office. She looked surprised, but she didn't ask questions, just handed me her keys and patted my shoulder softly. In that dim, echoing building, I waited in line behind young couples applying for marriage licenses and sweaty men paying property fines. My heart thudded so hard I thought everyone around me could hear it. When it was finally my turn, I asked for a copy of the original deed to the house. The clerk disappeared into a back room and returned with a manila folder, yellowed at the edges. I opened it there at the counter. There it was, clear as day, my name. My husband left me that house when he died. I never changed the ownership, never signed it over, despite Jenna's assumptions and constant pushing. She had strutted around telling her friends, my house, my rules, for years, as if she had built those walls herself with her bare hands. Standing there, holding that deed, I felt something break free inside me. For so long, I had let her rewrite my life story, turn me into a character in her play, the silent, convenient mother who stayed out of the way and picked up the pieces. But that paper in my hands was proof that my life hadn't been erased. That house was mine, always had been. I walked out of that office into the bright morning sun, the folder pressed tight against my chest. I remembered my husband's voice, the way he used to say, "Take care of yourself first. The rest will fall in place." In that moment, for the first time in years, I felt the ground under my feet. Solid. Mine. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, a plan already forming behind my ribs. That night, I lay on Linda's old floral couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it creaked in slow, lazy circles above me. The house was quiet, except for the soft ticking of a clock in the hallway. I held the manila folder on my chest like a shield. The deed felt heavier than any weight Jenna had ever put on me. It wasn't just paper. It was proof of everything I had sacrificed and everything I still owned of myself. I pulled out an old envelope of photos from my bag and spread them across my blanket. Jenna as a baby, pudgy hands wrapped around my thumb. Jenna at her high school graduation, beaming through tears, her head tucked into my shoulder. Somewhere along the way, the sweet girl who used to run barefoot into my arms had vanished. The girl who once whispered, "Mama, you're my best friend," was gone. I pressed a photo to my lips, trying to breathe her back. But the more I stared, the more I realized she had been drifting away for years, each harsh word and cold stare cutting another small thread between us. Where did I go wrong? Was it when I gave too much? When I didn't make her stand on her own feet after Mark left? When I sold my apartment without asking for anything in return? I let her treat my love like an endless well she could keep drawing from without ever worrying it might run dry. A sharp pang spread through my chest, but I didn't cry this time. I felt hollow, but clear, like a tree stripped bare in winter, still standing, roots strong under the frost. The ceiling fan creaked on. In the silence, a memory of my husband's voice floated back to me, as if he were sitting right there on that couch. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Don't you ever forget that. I tucked the photos back into the envelope and folded the deed carefully beside me. For the first time in a long time, I felt the faintest shimmer of peace settle over me. Not because I had figured it all out, but because I finally saw the truth. She didn't break me. She just showed me that I was never meant to be her foundation forever. I closed my eyes and fell asleep to the soft creak of the fan, knowing that by morning, the woman who woke up wouldn't be the same one who packed her bags in silence. The next morning, I knocked on Mr. Ellis's door with the manila folder clutched under my arm like a lifeline. He opened it slowly, wearing the same old cardigan he'd had for decades, the one with the elbow patches his wife had sewn before she passed. His eyes crinkled with surprise and worry when he saw me standing there. "Mabel," he said, using my real name, not Mom or Grandma or Burden, just me. "Come on in." His living room smelled like pipe tobacco and old wood polish. Stacks of legal books leaned against the walls, a testament to the years he spent as a lawyer before retirement turned him into the quiet neighborhood sage. I sat down carefully on his plaid sofa. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip my knees to steady them. He didn't push. He just sat across from me, waiting, like he always did when my husband was alive and we used to come over for pie and stories. Finally, I pulled out the deed and set it on the coffee table between us. His eyes widened, then narrowed in focus. "Is this?" he started. "It's mine," I said. My voice cracked, but I didn't look away. All these years, she thought it was hers. She made me feel like I was a guest in my own life. But it's mine. Mr. Ellis leaned forward and picked up the papers with trembling fingers. He flipped through them slowly, nodding as he read. "You have every right," he said finally, his voice low and deliberate. "You can reclaim that house. You can sell it if you want to. She has no legal claim." A tear slipped down my cheek, hot and sharp. "I don't want to destroy her," I whispered. I want her to see me, to understand I was never hers to use." Mr. Ellis set the papers down and took my hands in his. His skin was rough, warm, real. "You gave her everything," he said. "Now it's time to give something back to yourself. This is not about revenge. It's about remembering who you are." I closed my eyes. His words felt like water over scorched earth. He offered to help handle everything discreetly. No messy scenes, no public fights, just quiet power, the kind I hadn't realized I still held. As I stood to leave, he squeezed my hands one last time. "Call me anytime," he said. "You're not alone in this, Mabel. Not anymore." I stepped out into the morning sun, the weight of the folder lighter now. For the first time in years, I felt someone truly standing beside me. A week later, I stood in the doorway of that house, my house, with the realtor beside me. Jenna was at work. The kids were at school. The silence inside felt heavy, like it knew what I was about to do. The realtor, a young woman named Caroline with gentle eyes, gave me a small nod. "Are you sure you're ready?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away. I stepped into the living room, the sunlight pouring across the rug where I used to sit and help the kids with puzzles. My eyes scanned the kitchen where I used to prepare after-school snacks, the hallway lined with fingerprints and small smudges of crayon. Room by room, we walked. The playroom still smelled faintly of glue and spilled juice. The dining room table had a deep scratch from the night Jenna's youngest threw a toy truck across it, and I stayed up sanding and staining it for hours while she slept. My guest bedroom, my supposed space, felt like a prison cell now. The faded quilt, the chipped side table, the mirror that reflected a woman I barely knew anymore. Caroline took photos, each flash feeling like a tiny spark burning away the last of my illusions. I watched her frame the shot of the kitchen, the same kitchen where Jenna once hugged me tight after her first divorce hearing, whispering, "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom." But she did know. She learned. As Caroline clicked through each room, I felt my heart thud against my ribs like a wild animal desperate to break free. I thought I would crumble. I thought I would beg for another chance to be needed. But instead, I felt light. Every snap of that camera felt like a door opening inside me. After the final shot, we sat at the kitchen table. Caroline slid the preliminary listing paperwork toward me. My hand trembled only slightly as I signed each page. "This is the first step," she said, her voice low and kind. I nodded, staring at my signature. My name, my house, my choice. As we left, I turned back one last time. The house felt empty, yes, but for the first time, that emptiness belonged to me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest. I felt like a woman reclaiming her own story, one silent step at a time. That evening, just as the sun dipped below the rooftops outside Linda's window, my phone rang. Jenna's name lit up the screen. For a moment, I almost didn't answer. My thumb hovered there, trembling. But then I remembered that signature on the papers, the finality in each stroke of my pen. I pressed accept. "Mom!" she shrieked, before I could even breathe. "I need you to come watch the kids tomorrow. I have an emergency work trip, and you know how chaotic it gets." I closed my eyes, taking in her voice, so sharp, so entitled, like I was a permanent fixture she could snap her fingers at whenever life got messy. "I can't, Jenna," I said quietly. Silence. Then an intake of breath so sharp it sounded like she'd swallowed glass. "What do you mean you can't? You always can. That's your job," she spat. I imagined her face, red and twisted, her fists balled at her sides. The same face she made as a toddler when I told her she couldn't have candy before dinner. "No," I said again, my voice steadier this time. "I won't be coming back." She didn't process it at first. The next moment her words poured out like acid. "You selfish witch! After everything I've done for you, you wouldn't even have a roof over your head if it weren't for me. You think you're what, some kind of independent woman now? You're pathetic." Her words clanged around in my chest, but they didn't stick like they used to. I thought of those papers, of Caroline's soft nod, of Mr. Ellis's firm grip on my hands, of Linda's gentle tea-scented embrace. I thought of the quiet, empty house that was finally mine to release. "I won't be coming back," I repeated. I heard a guttural sob on the other end, then a final shriek before she hung up. I set the phone down on the table, my hands strangely still. Linda peeked in from the kitchen. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded slowly, a small spark of something warm rising in my chest. Relief, maybe even pride. "She called me a witch," I said, a small surprised laugh breaking free. "Imagine that!" Linda grinned, a glimmer of triumph in her eyes. That evening, as the stars blinked on outside, I realized that her words didn't break me this time. They only proved what I'd known deep down. She didn't love me. She loved the use of me, and I had finally said no. After she hung up, the house fell into a silence so deep I could hear my own heart. It wasn't racing like before. It was steady, like the beat of a drum in the distance, calling me forward. I sat at Linda's kitchen table, the chipped blue mug of chamomile tea steaming between my hands. My fingers wrapped around it, needing something warm to anchor me after Jenna's shrieks. Linda sat across from me, peeling an apple slowly, watching me the way a mother watches a newborn, careful, gentle, ready to catch me if I fell. The realtor had texted just moments before. Strong buyer interest already. We should get multiple offers by next week. I read the words over and over, each time feeling a strange calm settle deeper in my bones. No turning back. I thought I might feel guilt or panic. I thought I might imagine Jenna's face, the kids' small voices calling for me, but all I felt was an ache, a hollow echo that was more relief than sorrow. I took a slow sip of the tea. The floral bitterness settled on my tongue like a promise. Linda reached across and touched my wrist. "You're really doing it," she said, her voice trembling a little. I nodded, tears finally slipping free. Not sobbing, just quiet tears sliding down my cheeks and soaking into my collar. "She thinks I owe her everything," I whispered, "but I gave her everything already. My home, my savings, my knees, my sleep." Linda squeezed my hand harder. Outside the window, the sun had long disappeared. Only the glow of a lone street lamp lit the porch, the shadows soft and forgiving. I realized that for the first time in years, no one was waiting for me to get up and make dinner. No one was expecting me to clean up, or fold laundry, or mind a crying baby. I was free to just sit. That quiet was sharp at first, but slowly, it began to feel like a balm. I looked at Linda and took another sip, my hand steady now. "No turning back," I said again, this time with a calm certainty that tasted sweeter than any tea. The next morning, I woke up in Linda's guest room before sunrise. The house was still dark, the walls humming with that soft quiet that only comes before the world starts stirring. I sat up slowly, my bones groaning, but there was something else rising inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and pressed my feet into the rug. Firm, solid. Mine. I shuffled into the bathroom and stared at my reflection under the harsh light. The woman looking back at me wasn't the ghost who tiptoed around Jenna's moods. This face, lined, puffy-eyed, hair wild, was mine. Entirely mine. I washed my face, patted it dry, and caught myself smiling in the mirror. A small, shaky smile, but real. Downstairs, I found Linda reading the newspaper, her glasses sliding halfway down her nose. She looked up, startled. "You're up early," she said. I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hand steady. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Too many plans running through my head." Linda watched me carefully, her brow furrowed. But I could see it. That glimmer of pride behind her worry. I looked out the window at the pale dawn, my fingers tightening around the warm mug. "I feel different," I said. "I feel like I can breathe again." And in that moment, I promised myself I would never let anyone shrink me back down again. Not Jenna. Not her guilt. Not my old fears. I was awake now, and I wasn't going back to sleep. 2 days later, I went back to the house while Jenna was at work and the kids were at school. The realtor had given me a narrow window, just a couple of hours, to collect whatever was left of me inside those walls. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, the keys trembling in my hand. The house felt different already, like it knew it was no longer hers to control. When I stepped inside, the smell of stale coffee and cheap air freshener hit me like a slap. I walked straight to my old guest room, my prison, and opened the closet. I found my old photo albums, the ones Jenna had always rolled her eyes at. The one with her first birthday cake smeared across her face, the one with her father holding her on his shoulders at the beach. I pulled them down, my hands shaking as I flipped through them one last time in that house. I saw a younger me in those photos, laughing, strong, certain. I gathered my jewelry box next. Cheap pieces mostly, but each one held a memory. A brooch from my mother, a little heart necklace Jenna gave me in 2nd grade, a simple gold ring from my husband. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart slam against my ribs. My ears strained for the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. But the house stayed silent, as if holding its breath with me. I moved carefully, like a ghost, drifting through old memories. I pulled my knitting bag from under the bed, my quilt squares still half finished, pieces of a life that had been on pause for too long. By the time I zipped up the final bag, my fingers were numb from the rush of it all. I stood in the center of that small room and looked around, the faded quilt on the bed, the framed cross-stitch on the wall that said home is where the heart is. A cruel joke now. I felt a sudden urge to apologize to the walls, to the ghost of the woman I had been here, the woman who tiptoed, who held her breath, who said yes, even when her bones screamed no. But I didn't say sorry. I didn't owe anyone an apology anymore. I walked out with my bags, every step echoing in the empty hallway like a drumbeat of freedom. I locked the door behind me, my fingers steady at last. I didn't look back. On the day of the big showing, I arrived early. The realtor met me at the front door, her eyes kind but searching, as if she was afraid I might change my mind. I gave her a small nod. The kind you give when you've already cried all your tears and there's nothing left but resolve. We stood in the living room, that bright bay window pouring in sunlight like it was blessing the moment. The window where I used to stand, watching Jenna come home from school, her backpack bouncing, her hair tangled from playground games. The realtor handed me the final sale agreement, the last piece of paper, the last tether. My hand trembled only once before I set it down on the old dining table and signed my name in smooth, deliberate strokes. Mabel. There it was, in ink, a lifetime of sacrifice, betrayal, and finally, release, compressed into a few letters. I sat there for a moment after signing, my breath slow and heavy. I traced the grooves in the wooden table, remembering the late-night cups of tea, the piles of bills I'd helped Jenna sort, the endless arguments I swallowed like bitter pills. I thought I might feel grief. I thought I might crumple right there, beg the universe to turn me back into that woman who always stayed, always said yes, but instead, I felt something shift in my chest, a cracking open, like a window stuck shut for decades, finally letting in fresh air. I stood up and walked through each room one last time. The kitchen, where I'd nursed my bad knees while stirring soup for children who barely looked up from their phones. The hallway, where Jenna's angry footsteps used to echo after every small disappointment. The guest room, where I had learned to disappear. As I moved, each room felt less like a wound and more like an echo fading away. I returned to the living room and met the realtor's eyes. She gave me a small, reverent nod, as if she could sense the quiet power in that moment. "It's done," I said, my voice low but unbreakable. Outside, the sun glared bright and sharp, almost daring me to flinch, but I didn't. I had signed away the house, but I had signed myself back into my own life. That afternoon, I was still at the house, standing in the entryway, when I heard the familiar rattle of Jenna's old sedan in the driveway. I watched through the stained glass window as she stepped out, her purse swinging wildly, keys jangling. She looked irritated already, probably thinking about what chore she'd bark at me first. She shoved open the front door, her mouth open to call out a demand, and then she froze. A couple was touring the living room with the realtor, chatting in low, excited voices as they admired the bay window and the newly cleaned hardwood floors. Jenna's eyes went wide, her face paling so fast I thought she might faint. "What? What is this?" she sputtered, her voice shrill and cracking. She turned to me, hands trembling at her sides. "Mom? What the hell is happening? Who are these people in my house?" The words rang in the hallway like a cracked bell. I didn't move at first. I wanted her to feel it, the heavy electric silence that had choked me for years. Then I stepped forward, slowly, each movement deliberate, each breath measured. "It's not your house, Jenna," I said, my voice calm. "It never was." She staggered back, her eyes darting wildly around the room, as if searching for proof that this was some terrible joke. The realtor paused, clearly sensing the storm that had just swept in. The young couple glanced over, startled, but kept moving into the kitchen. Jenna's mouth flapped open again. "No, no, you can't do this. You can't. I live here. The kids. You need to stop this right now. I felt my spine straighten, taller than it had been in years. It's already done, I said simply. She lunged at me then, grabbing my arm like a drowning woman. Mom! You can't throw us out. You owe me. You owe us everything. I looked down at her hand, clutching my sleeve, and for a moment, I saw the little girl she once was, the one who used to run to me, crying after a scraped knee. But that little girl was gone. This woman in front of me had smothered her long ago with entitlement and venom. I pried her fingers off gently, as if removing a vine strangling an old tree. No, Jenna, I whispered, my voice low enough that only she could hear. I owe you nothing. I stepped past her into the bright afternoon light spilling through the open door. Behind me, I heard her gasp, then a sob break loose, raw and sharp, but I didn't turn around. I stopped on the front porch, my shadow stretching across the steps. Behind me, Jenna's sobs turned into a strangled scream. What did you do? She wailed, stumbling toward me, her face blotched red, hair sticking to her forehead. This is my house. You can't do this to me. I turned slowly, my heartbeat steady and calm. From my purse, I pulled out a single folded document, the copy of the deed. I held it out to her like a final offering, the last piece of proof she could never twist or deny. Here, I said, read it. She snatched it from my hand, her fingers tearing at the paper as she unfolded it. Her eyes darted over the words, faster and faster, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. Her face changed all at once, from rage to confusion, then to horror. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked up at me, her eyes wild and desperate. This can't be real, she choked out. You lied to me, I shook my head. No, Jenna, you lied to yourself. You built a life on a story that was never true. You convinced yourself you owned me, owned this house, owned my love. But you never did. She crumpled to her knees on the porch, the paper trembling in her hands like a final verdict. This is all I have, she sobbed, her voice shattering against the wood. What about the kids? What about me? I looked down at her, my heart heavy but no longer chained. You'll figure it out, I said quietly. The way I did. The way you should have a long time ago. For a moment, she looked up at me like a lost child. But I saw no remorse in her eyes. Only fear of losing comfort. Fear of losing control. Behind us, the realtor and the couple stepped out cautiously, the young woman clutching her partner's arm, their faces pale. But I didn't care. Let them see. Let the world see. I turned away, stepping down the porch steps slowly, each movement clean and deliberate. Behind me, Jenna's cries rose up to the sky, sharp, raw, echoing off the walls she had once claimed as her own. I kept walking. My feet met the gravel of the path, steady as a drumbeat. I didn't look back. Not once. I heard her fall before I saw it. A dull thud behind me on the porch, followed by a strangled sob so raw it twisted the air. I turned just enough to see Jenna crumpled on the wooden boards, her knees pulled to her chest, the deed crumpled beside her like a useless rag. Her shoulders shook violently as she rocked back and forth, the same way she used to when she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. But there was no storm this time, just the lightning she had called down on herself. She clutched at the edge of the porch, her voice splintering. Please, please, Mom, don't do this. I need you. We need you. I stood at the foot of the steps, my breath heavy in my chest. A part of me, that old obedient part, wanted to run back up, gather her in my arms, and whisper that everything would be okay. But I stayed where I was, because everything wouldn't be okay. Not if I kept saving her from consequences she never believed would come. I saw her face, twisted in panic and rage, her eyes wide with the horror of finally realizing she had nothing left to hold over me. You said you loved me, she cried out, her voice breaking. You said you'd always take care of me. I swallowed hard, feeling every crack in my heart echo through my bones. I did, I said softly. I took care of you for longer than I ever took care of myself. But love without respect isn't love. It's servitude. She pressed her forehead to the porch boards, her cries rising into the air like a wounded animal. The couple near the driveway stood frozen, unable to move or look away. The realtor shifted uncomfortably, but I didn't flinch. The finality of my words hung heavy, filling every corner of that porch, that yard, that old life. Jenna didn't rise. She didn't argue anymore. Her sobs turned quiet, her body curling tighter and tighter, as if trying to disappear into the wood. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own choices. I turned again and began walking down the path, my spine straight, my hands free at my sides. I didn't know where my next step would lead, but I knew this. I would never again be the woman begging for scraps of love in her own home. The sale finalized that same week. I signed the last closing documents from Linda's kitchen table, a mug of mint tea steaming beside me. The papers felt almost weightless in my hands, so different from the heavy, silent burdens I had carried for decades. When it was done, I set the pen down and exhaled. Not the shaky, frightened exhale of a woman bracing for another blow. This was deep, sure, the breath of a woman who had finally stepped out from under someone else's thumb. Word spread quickly. Jenna had nowhere to go. She moved into a cramped rental on the edge of town, a small 2-bedroom with peeling paint and neighbors who fought in the hallway. I heard from Linda that she had to admit to her friends what happened. She told them I betrayed her. She painted me as the villain who turned her children's lives upside down. But when people saw the way she walked now, eyes down, shoulders caved in, they understood. They saw the truth in the way she carried her own grocery bags for the first time, the way her voice lost that sharp, entitled edge. She called me a few times after the move. I didn't answer. She left voicemails, her voice twisting between venom and pleading. She said she was humiliated, that her friends abandoned her, that she, quote, had nothing left. I listened to each message once, then deleted it, because for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. She had forced me to my knees for years, and she never once looked back to see if I was still breathing. Now, it was her turn to feel the emptiness she created. Linda would read the updates from local friends over our morning coffees. Sometimes she'd look at me, waiting to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I sat there, calm, steady, my hands warm around my mug. I had lost a daughter, yes, but I gained something far more precious. My freedom, my dignity, my right to breathe without asking permission. And for the first time in a long time, I could almost hear my own laughter echo back from somewhere deep inside me. I moved into a small retirement condo by the lake the following month. It wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms and a sunroom that caught the light in the mornings so perfectly it looked like the walls were made of gold. The first morning there, I stood barefoot on the balcony, a warm cup of coffee in my hands. The smell of the lake drifted up, soft and clean, carrying the sound of ducks and the gentle slap of water against the shore. No angry voices echoing down the hallway. No slammed doors. No footsteps demanding I hurry up and serve, apologize, fix. Just quiet. Sometimes, the kids come to visit. They run through my little condo with bright eyes and sticky hands, and I bake cookies with them just like we used to. Except now, there's no harsh voice calling from another room, no tension pulling me tight like a rope. We laugh freely, our joy echoing off the walls I chose for myself. Jenna doesn't come. At first, I thought that might break me. But the truth is, I've already grieved the daughter I thought I had. The one who needed me, loved me, respected me. She's gone. And I've made peace with that. I rewrote my will recently. When the children turn 18, everything will go to them. The money from the house, my savings, the small treasures I've carried all these years. I won't let them become twisted by entitlement or bitterness. They'll know my love is a gift, not a weapon. When I think back to that kitchen, the slam of the dish, the words that ripped me apart, I feel a strange kind of gratitude. Because that moment forced me to see the truth. I wasn't living. I was merely surviving in the shadows of someone else's anger. Now, I live for me.